Book of Heaven Volume 2, Call of the Creature to the Order, the Place and the Purpose for which he was created by God, by the servant of God Luisa Piccarreta. Page 62-69. July 18, 1899, How Sacramental Jesus and the Soul Draw and Bind Each Other. It continues almost always in the same way. This time it seemed that in my heart there was sacramental Jesus, spreading many rays in my interior from the Holy Host. Many threads were coming out of my heart, which intertwined with all those rays of light. It seemed to me that Jesus, with his love, was drawing all of my heart to himself, and my heart, with those threads, was drawing and binding all of Jesus to remain with me. July 22, 1899, How the Cross Renders the Soul Transparent. How to avoid the precipice. This morning my adorable Jesus made himself seen with a golden cross, all shining, hanging from his neck, and in looking at it, he was immensely pleased. In one instant the confessor was present, and Jesus said to him, "The sufferings of these past days have increased the splendor of the cross, so much so, that in looking at it, I take great delight." Then he turned to me and told me, "The cross communicates such splendor to the soul as to render her transparent. Just as one can give all the colors he wants to an object which is transparent, in the same way, with its light the cross provides all features and the most beautiful shapes that can possibly be imagined, not only by others, but by the very soul who experiences them. Furthermore, on a transparent object one can immediately detect dust, little stains, and even a shadow. Such is the cross, since it renders the soul transparent, it immediately reveals to the soul the little defects, and the slightest imperfections, so much so, that there is no hand of master more capable than the cross in keeping the soul prepared, to make of her a residence worthy of the God of heaven. Who can say what I understood of the cross, and how enviable is the soul who possesses it? After this, he transported me outside of myself, and I found myself at the top of a most high staircase. There was a precipice under it, and what is more, the steps of this staircase were movable and so narrow that one could barely put the tips of his toes on it. What terrified the most was the precipice, and the fact that one could find no support whatsoever, and if one tried to cling to the steps, they would come out. The sight of other people, almost all of them falling, made one's bones shiver. Yet, there was no way other than going up those stairs. So I tried. But after I did just 2 or 3 steps, in seeing the great danger for me of falling into the abyss, I started to call Jesus, to come to my aid. Not knowing how, I found Jesus close to me, and he told me, "My daughter, what you have seen is the path which all men cover on this earth. The movable steps, on which they cannot even lean to find support, are the human supports, the earthly things. If one tries to lean on them, instead of giving him help, they give him a push to fall more quickly into hell. The safest means is to climb, almost flying, without touching the ground, by force of one's arms, with the eyes all fixed on oneself, without looking at others, and also by keeping them all intent on me, in order to receive help and strength. In this way one can easily avoid the precipice." July 28, 1899, The cross is the noblest mark in the soul. This morning, my adorable Jesus came with an appearance all admirable and mysterious. He was wearing a chain at his neck, hanging over his whole breast. At one end of the chain, one could see something like a bow, at the other end, something like a quiver full of precious stones and gems which formed an ornament of the most beautiful sort on the breast of my sweet Jesus. He also had a lance in his hand. While in this appearance, he told me, "The human life is a game. Some play pleasure, some play money, some their own lives, and many other games they play. I too delight in playing with souls, but what are the jokes I make? They are the crosses which I send. If they receive them with resignation and thank me for them, I amuse myself and I play with them, delighting immensely, receiving great honor and glory, and letting them make the greatest gains. As he was saying this, he began to touch me with the lance. All the precious stones that the bow and the quiver contained came out, and turned into many crosses and arrows which wounded the creatures. Some of them, but extremely few, rejoiced, kissed them, and thanked him, engaging in a game with Jesus. Others then would take them and throw them in his face. Oh, how afflicted Jesus would be left, and what a loss for those souls. Then Jesus added, "This is the thirst which I cried out on the cross, which, unable to quench entirely at that time, I delight in continuing to quench in the souls of my dear ones who suffer. So, when you suffer, you come to give a refreshment to my thirst." As he came other times, and I prayed him to free the confessor, who was suffering, he told me, "My daughter, don't you know that the noblest mark I can impress in my dear children is the cross?" July 30th, 1899. Do not judge your neighbor. It continues almost always in the same way. This morning, as Jesus transported me outside of myself according to his usual way, we passed through the midst of many people, and the majority of them were intent on judging other people's actions, without looking at their own. My beloved Jesus told me, the surest means to be upright with one's neighbor is to not look at all at what they are doing, because looking, thinking and judging is all the same. Besides, by looking at his neighbor, one comes to defraud his own soul, therefore it happens that he is not upright either with himself, or with his neighbor, or with God. After this, I said to him, "My only good, it has been a while since you gave me even just a kiss." And so we kissed each other. Then, almost wanting to correct me, he added, "My daughter, what I recommend to you is to preserve and cherish my words, because my word is eternal and pure as I am myself, and by preserving it in your heart and profiting from it, you will have your sanctification and will receive an eternal splendor as recompense, which is produced by my word. By doing otherwise, your soul would receive a void, and you would remain my debtor." July 31st, 1899. Intellectual communication between Jesus and the soul. The mouth remains mute. Jesus came also this morning, though always in silence. But I was very content, as long as I had my treasure, Jesus, because by having him, I had all my contentments. In seeing him, I comprehended many things about his beauty, about his goodness and other things, but since it was all through the intelligence and by means of intellectual communication, my mouth is incapable of expressing anything, so I let it pass in silence. August 1st, 1899, about purity. This morning my most gentle Jesus, carrying me outside of myself, made me see the corruption into which mankind has decayed. It is horrifying to think about it. While I was in the midst of these people, almost crying, Jesus was saying, "Oh, man, how you have disfigured, deformed, disennobled yourself. Oh man, I made you so that you might be my living temple, but you have made of yourself the dwelling of the devil. Look, even the plants, by being covered with leaves, flowers and fruits, teach you honesty and the modesty you must have with your body, but you, having lost any modesty and even the natural reserve you should have become worse than the animals, so much so, that I have nothing else to which to compare you. You were my image, but now I no longer recognize you. Even more, I am so horrified at your impurities, that the mere sight of you nauseates me, and you yourself force me to flee from you." While Jesus was saying this, I felt tortured with the pain of seeing my beloved Jesus so embittered, so I said to him, "Lord, you are right that you find nothing good in man anymore, and that he has reached such blindness as to no longer be able even to keep to the laws of nature. So, if you want to look at man, you will do nothing but send chastisements, therefore I pray you to keep your gaze on your mercy, and in this way everything will be remedied. As I was saying this, Jesus told me, Daughter, give me a refreshment for my pains. In the act of saying this, he removed the crown of thorns, which seemed to be sunken into his adorable head, and he drove it into mine. I felt most bitter pains, but I was content that Jesus was being refreshed. After this, he told me, Daughter, I greatly love pure souls, and just as I am forced to flee from the impure, I am drawn by the pure, as by a magnet, to dwell with them. To pure souls I gladly lend my mouth to let them speak with my own tongue, therefore they have to make no effort to convert souls. With these souls, I delight not only in continuing my passion within them, and so continuing redemption, but what is more, I greatly delight in glorifying my own virtues in them. August 2, 1899, Correspondence to Jesus. This morning my adorable Jesus made himself seen all afflicted and almost angry with men, threatening to send the usual chastisements and to make people die suddenly under lightnings, hail and fire. I prayed him very much to placate himself, and Jesus told me, the iniquities that rise from the earth to heaven are so many, that if prayer and souls who are victims before me were missing for a quarter of an hour, I would make fire come out of the earth and inundate the people. Then he added, See how many graces I was supposed to pour over the creatures, but since I find no correspondence, I am forced to hold them back within myself. Even more, they make me change them into chastisement. Be careful, you, O my daughter, to correspond to me in the so many graces I am pouring into you, because correspondence is the open door to let me enter into the heart and form my residence in it. Correspondence is like that good welcome, that esteem, which is used with people when they come to visit us, in such a way that, drawn by that respect, by those affable manners used with them, they are forced to come again, and reach the point of not being able to detach themselves. Everything is in corresponding to me, and according to how souls correspond to me and treat me on earth, so will I behave with them in heaven. Making them find the doors open, I will invite the whole celestial court to welcome them, and I will place them on the most sublime throne, but it will be all the opposite for those who do not correspond to me. August 7, 1899, about our nothingness. This morning my lovable Jesus would not come. After much waiting and waiting, finally he came. My confusion and annihilation was such that I was unable to tell him anything. Jesus told me, the more you annihilate yourself and come to know your nothingness, the more my humanity, unleashing rays of light, will communicate my virtues to you. I said to him, Lord, I am so bad and ugly as to be horrifying to myself. What must I be before you? And Jesus, if you are ugly, I can make you beautiful. And in the act of saying this, he sent a light from himself to my soul, and it seemed that he would communicate his beauty to it. Then, embracing me, he began to say, How beautiful you are, but beautiful of my own beauty, this is why I am drawn to love you. Who can say how confused I remained, more than ever? But, may everything be for his glory.